It was hard for the United States, after so many years of the Cold War, to view Russia as a future trade partner rather than as a continued security threat, and so, Sachs says, his plan was undermined.
This was the era when Mr. Cheney was Defense Secretary, and he was thinking not about how to quickly help Russia get off its knees. He was thinking about, I believe, cementing the U.S. position in the world.
Mr. Wolfowitz was there back then, too.
Absolutely, and I think they made serious mistakes, very serious mistakes. And I think we have pay a price for it, which is that if we had helped Russia early on, if we had helped them avoid the high inflation, if we had helped avoid, I then resigned early on. Right. It's very important for me to explain that I was against the looting. I was against this kind of phony privatization. I was
the kleptocracy that took over, the privatization in the hands of a very small number of people who took over billion-dollar industries.
Yeah, the so-called oligarchs now.
That's right.
I had left well before.
That's not a failure of the so-called Sachs quick therapy.
Well, quite the contrary. I was completely against it, and even in those times, since I still knew something about what was really going on, I was going to the U.S. Treasury, I was going to the IMF, I was going to the World Bank. Look what's happening. Do something. Raise your voice at least. Nah, they weren't interested.
And so, with much controversy, Jeff Sachs left Russia. Next stop for Dr. Sachs was the East, first China. And there he found the mighty Asian tiger making up for lost time that had been squandered since the Ming Emperor closed China to international trade back in 1434. And then he went to India, where he found the Indian elephant wasn't lumbering anymore. Instead, it was bursting into the world economy with high-tech information services after spending years in a knee-jerk protectionist mode.
Those two mammoth countries have almost 40% of the world's population. China was already in the midst of an astounding takeoff. And then I saw India in the early days of its reforms, because its real breakthrough to openness to the world markets began in mid-1991. Right. And step by step, I just kept expanding the parts of the world that I could see and was working on and was studying, and also the range of issues that I found to be important to come back to the central question that I had asked: what is making for a good society and for economic effectiveness, and what isn't working? AIDS, endemic malaria, drought, a catastrophe.
This is a guy who can draw a crowd to a talk about one of the weariest and sometimes toughest subjects of all time, world poverty. And Jeff Sachs says that this is the generation that will finally end hunger and disease in the world, the kind of poverty that means a malaria patient shares the same bed with a tuberculosis patient in an African hospital, the kind of poverty that means a grandmother must raise all of her grandchildren because a generation of parents have been lost to AIDS, the kind of poverty that to this very day and every second kills.
If we don't value human life enough to pay attention to the 20,000 people who will die today because they're too extremely poor to stay alive, we are putting at risk our own lives and the lives of our children.
What are the fundamental factors that have led to some countries, Europe, North America, some parts of Asia, getting rich, and some either staying poor or getting worse? What should we look for?
Well, the fundamental thing was the Industrial Revolution, and it was the mobilization of non-biomass energy, basically fossil fuels. The coal revolution, being able to harness massive amounts of energy. It's a long and complicated story, but the key point is everybody poor 200 years ago, some places get the early wave and carry it all the way through. That's today's rich world.
Right.
Other places pick up the story much later. Maybe they were conquered, couldn't get on with it for a while, and only in the 20th century could they get on with it.
What's holding back Africa versus, let's say, the Tiger nations on the Rim, the Pacific Rim?
I think Africa has faced many huge challenges. Of course, its history, the slave era, the colonial era, lots of brutality. It definitely cost Africa a lot. But I think again, the geographical shapers are really profound, very important to understand, and I would name three. First, Africa did not have a green revolution of food production like Asia did. Second is disease. Africa has a disease burden unmatched in any other part of the world. Malaria probably will kill 3 million children this year. It's unbelievable, actually, how pervasive the disease is, how many times a year a child in the savannas of Africa and the villages will get malaria.
What else is holding Africa back?
Africans live in the highlands. Burundi, Rwanda, the highlands of Ethiopia, these are the most densely populated parts of Africa. They don't look like the most favorable places. Why don't Africans live on the coast? And the answer is that the highlands have been, from time immemorial, better places to grow food. That's okay for subsistence, but try to set up a factory to produce apparel for export from 1,000 miles in the interior of the continent. No, people will go to port cities all over the world. So you're trapped. Solutions exist, but you can't afford them.
This is the poverty trap. Paint us the picture of extreme poverty in the world. Just how pervasive is this thing?
I'm talking about the poorest billion people on the planet.
1 billion people.
That's right. That's about 1 out of every 6 of our fellow inhabitants are in extreme poverty. What's extreme poverty? It's poverty that kills. Poverty that's so extreme that you don't meet basic needs. Chronic hunger and undernutrition. A body that can't mount an effective immune response to an infection. Drinking water that is simply not safe to drink, yet used every single day. Living with mosquitoes transmitting malaria, but no reliable medicines to prevent it, not even a bed net treated with insecticide to repel the mosquitoes. The most basic needs are not met.
Under a dollar a day is the definition.
It's conventionally defined as
right.
Under $1 a day, but what that really means is not that you don't even get a cash dollar.
A child dies completely unnecessarily as a result of extreme poverty every 3 seconds.
If Sachs's call to end poverty sounds idealistic or even naive, it definitely has momentum right now. His supporter Bono has a campaign called the One Campaign to make poverty history, and some of the biggest names in the entertainment business are behind it.
Somebody's daughter, somebody's son.
By the year 2015, we should aim to give 70 cents out of every $100, step by step, making the investments in the poorest places of the world, fighting malaria, fighting AIDS, helping with safe drinking water, helping farmers to grow more food, a green revolution for Africa. And if we did these practical steps, this would stop this downward spiral. The goal of 70 cents on every $100 of aid flowing from richer countries to poorer ones was actually set in 1969 by Canada's own former Prime Minister, Lester B. Pearson. He was asked to chair a commission on world poverty. The Commission's 1969 report, called Partners in Development, was embraced by everyone from the World Bank to the United Nations General Assembly.
What if it were possible to agree on them?
However, the goal of giving 0.07% of the gross national income to developing countries was supposed to be reached by the year 1975. It still hasn't happened. Right